Thank you, Madam President. I want to first identify with all that has been said about all of the individuals here this morning. Sir Arlington Butler, Mr. Calvin Johnson, Mr. Carver Grant, Reverend Ralph Russell, Ms. Queenie Hanna, Ronnie Butler, and I'd like to add to that Ricardo Marks, who is a Justice of the Supreme Court and retired and passed away last week. One thing about living in a small country is you literally, if you're trying to find somebody, you literally, all you have to do, at least in our country, is stand up on Bay Street for 15 minutes, and the person you're looking for will pass by. So we got to know everybody. And it's a joy, really, to be in a small country because you land at the airport and everybody says, hey, you're back home, where you been? And you know everybody who's a customs officer, immigration officer. Well, these days, as you get older, you don't know the younger set, but they know you. And that's the joy of living in a small town. And so that is what I found the commonality of all of the expressions that are here today, is that we are but 400,000 people, and we know each other. And Arthur Hanna used to say one of the reasons why he would never write a memoir or a book about his political life was because you can't tell the real stories of what happened. And so when I heard your description of what happened in 1977, I said, well, I could tell a different story, but I won't, because that's not the occasion. But everyone has a story to tell, and it's an important story. I'd like to speak about a few of them. Ronnie Butler, for example. He released a song in 1968, it'll be 50 years next year, called Going Down Burma Road, which memorializes the riots of 1942, which were known as the Burma Road riots. But the line that I'd like to talk about now is the beginning line. He begins the song by saying, "Don't mind Livingston, Josiah is the JP." And that, of course, is connected to my old constituency, the constituency that I represented. And Josiah Ramming was the grandfather of now Senator Johnny Ann Dorset. And he was a JP. And I gather Livingston was his son. And the song was saying, don't mind Livingston, Josiah is the JP. And he takes us down memory lane through that song. When we were in government, decided that every year we would honor a particular musical artist. And we started 2 years ago, or a particular Bahamian artist. We started 2 years ago with Freddie Munnings and his tribute to the city of Nassau. And this year we did Sir Sidney Poitier as the Oscar-winning artist. And we had planned next year to mark the 50th anniversary of that song by a celebration of the life of Ronnie Butler. Unfortunately, he won't be around for such a tribute if we are able to do it. And I would commend the government to think about that, because the range of songs which he's contributed, and you know, Bob Dylan, who was a troubadour of my youth, has just gotten the Nobel Prize for literature for singing songs, you know, blowing in the wind. But when the Senator Thompson talked about those lines about, I remember when we used to go to high mass on Sunday morning with high top tennis and no socks on, and God help you if it rains, because toe jam will kill you. I mean, And he didn't write those, he made those up. He was just, I think they call it a scat. So he was just talking as he was recording. But it's pure poetry, because in those few lines, he was able to sum up all that we celebrated on Majority Rule Day, that we had come so far. And yes, we grew up with those things, dirt poor, but look where we are now. And I think that that was the genius of his music. And so it's an enduring contribution to our country. And then Calvin Johnson, who served as a senator. I served with him in this place. He served as a diplomat and as a member of parliament. And what I remember about him is that he came to public service without airs. You know, many people take to these positions and sort of live in a bubble. But this was a man who, in my view, always had his feet planted on the ground and was always easy to talk to, easy to approach. And the thing I think about public service is that to understand that even though you are on other sides, that, you know, sometimes you help a brother or a sister out from the other side. You know, I've had, you know, members of parliament from the other side come to me and say, look, you know, I can't say this, but this is something you need to say. Because that's the way politics is sometimes constructed. And he was always like that. And I appreciated working with him and thank him for his service. The last person, though, that I would like to speak about is a truly historical figure, and that's Arlington Butler. And I could speak for a long time about Arlington Butler. Probably need to continue where I left off in the memoir that I did back after Sir Lyndon Pinling's death. But, and I almost don't know where to start. But the thing that I think Bahamians should remember, or I remember him for, and which I would commend you, is that at a point when the Progressive Liberal Party administration was at its most powerful, between 1972 and 1977, this is a man who stood up and said, I'm not going to do it. And I'm PLP, and I was PLP then. And there's a quality which I have always admired, which is when it is time for you to do the right thing, no matter where you are, you're supposed to do that thing. Because all the people are watching you, all the youngsters are watching you, and they expect you to see how you're going to manage your life and your situation. I didn't agree with the maneuver at the time, but it was a bold maneuver, and it is a great exercise for those who want to know how Parliament works. The BJC exams are now being done, and every day, a mother or a father, they're calling me. How does the Constitution work? What does prorogue mean? What does dissolve mean? How do you get nominated for the House? So, if you went back to Eddie Minnis's song, Show and Tell, that explains the entire story of what happened in August 1976, when the Public Disclosure Bill was brought to the House. As the Senator Bethel said after the luncheon adjournment, there were members who disagreed with the Public Disclosure Bill. They did not believe that their assets, income, and liabilities should be a matter of public record. And Arlington Butler was one of those who opposed it. But given what had gone and been argued in the public domain before, Sir Lyndon Pinling and his colleagues had decided that this was a matter of principle which they had to address. Thus came the Public Disclosure Bill. And on the luncheon adjournment, on the return of the luncheon adjournment, the Speaker summoned the House, and together with the opposition and backbenchers from the Progressive Liberal Party who were dissidents, they were able to overcome with a temporary majority and send the bill to committee. And as, as Eddie Minnis says, the PM told the governor, prorogue this House quick, quick. Bring it back in 10 days. These MPs think they're so slick. Tells you the whole story of the Parliament. But how Sir Arlington figured in it beyond that was that there was a letter sent by the leaders of the Progressive Liberal Party to him to ask him to attend a meeting qua member of the PLP to leader of the PLP and deputy leader. And he was offended by this. And so when the House reconvened, he gave an address to the House, which was carried live on the radio as it then was. And he said, I'm a man, and you can't summon the Speaker. And I think many people found out then, a provision which is still in the Constitution is, you can't remove the Speaker. Once he's there until dissolution. Can't move him. No confidence doesn't help you, you know, nothing you do. So when you're Speaker, you're the Speaker. So I remember him for that. I said, this is a man after my own heart. Now, of course, what we've come to see, and people have spoken well about him, is the gentle figure that we now see. But this is a tough fellow. I mean, please, make no mistake about it. This was a tough guy. And he knew how to fight in politics. And, you know, I was the brunt of that at one point. I had started writing a column for the Progressive Liberal Party in 1976 in the party's newspaper called the Herald. And so, you know, I was the target of every, you know, bit of contempt that people could sling at me from the F&M side. I mean, I enjoyed it. I loved the notoriety. But he had a newspaper. He and P. Anthony White owned a newspaper called Friday Morning's Mail. So one Friday, newspaper shows up, and there's this double truck attack on me. My picture's in the front, in the middle of the thing, and they just slashed and burned everything they could say about me. You know, personal, public, anything, going and coming. It was horrible. It was really horrible as a young man to be the object of that. I mean, everything you could think in the book. And I just thought, gee, I mean, you know, this is what you have to put up with as a public figure. Anyway, I'm going. Yeah, I understand. I come into that. You learn quickly. I think 76. No, I was about 76. Yeah, 76. I was 20. Yeah. Give as good as it takes, man. But I'm only saying. I mean, this was quite a thing. So I'm walking over to the House of Assembly one day, and Sir Arlington is on one side, Sir Lyndon Pindling on the other side. And so Sir Lyndon is looking at him, and he says, do you have a problem? And Sir Lyndon says, no. Pointing to me, he says, but it looks like you have a problem. And that was the only exchange on that. Right now, I'm planting this in my head as a young man. And I hope that this is a salutary lesson to those who are in public office today about divorcing your role of office holder from that of the personal. Because he became gravely ill, had suffered a stroke. And one day, as Minister for Immigration, I'm sitting in my office, and I get a call saying, Sir Arlington Butler's downstairs. So I hesitate for a bit. I said, oh, okay, well, you know, send him upstairs. He came. He was by himself. And he sat down in my office and asked me if he said that he needed a caregiver, and if it would be possible for me, as Minister for Immigration, to grant a work permit for his caregiver. And I thought to myself, good Lord Almighty. how life goes in a cycle. But the one doesn't have anything to do with the other. And that is how you ought to behave in public office. I never bore any grudge. I never took it to mean anything other than it is. But I tell younger politicians who are filled with hubris about their victory and, 2,500 people voting for them and they're in office and so on and so forth, that you must carry your office lightly, to wear it lightly. And he evolved into a statesman for this country. He had been a leader of the Olympic movement for a long time. His name was synonymous with the Olympics in this country. And you could always ask advice. He had a great sense of history. And what I identify with, as both of you were talking about him as former teachers, is I used to say to him, you must have taught everybody in this country. Because either he taught you in school or he was your cousin. I mean, I just never seen a man with so many cousins. That's my cousin. And if you were not in those categories, then you weren't known. And a tremendous wit. I really am pleased to have known him, to have interacted, to have the opportunity to be in public service in the Bahamas now going on 26 years. And then before that as a newspaper columnist and in broadcasting. So I've been a public figure for 40 years or more. And to have had this opportunity it's enriched my life tremendously. I wouldn't choose any other path. But to have met people like Sir Arlington Butler, to have interacted with them, and all the other people that we spoke of here today. It's been an enormous privilege and a proud honor on my part, and I wish to extend my condolences on behalf of our party, to join what everyone else has said here. I want to also extend condolences to the family of Justice Ricardo Marks. And I would say this, John Donne wrote these lines, "Death, be not proud, though some have called thee mighty and dreadful, for thou art not so." And then he says, "One short sleep past, we wake eternally, and death shall be no more. Death, thou shalt die." My condolences to all of the families, and I thank you for this intervention.
Thank you, Senator Mitchell.